A warm welcome to everyone joining us from all over the world. We're here at a beautiful Slovakia Ring for the GT Cup Series endurance race, an amazing format that got its first taste of racing last year right here in Slovakia. This year, we're back for more, of course, and the beautiful Slovakia Ring is the perfect match for endurance racing. We have 10 cars ready to battle it out for 3 straight hours. Here at the Slovakia Ring, we have plenty of classes out on track. First off, the D5 class with the prototypes getting ready to showcase every single inch and ounce of speed. Here at the Slovakia Ring, we have the Duquesne and Ligier LMP3 prototypes getting ready for what will be an amazing race, of course. And then we have plenty of cars and different classes getting ready. Of course, behind me, the 10 cars that are ready to start off here at the Slovakia Ring. We have GT3 entries. We have an amazing BMW M8 GTE as well, giving us everything in its powers. And then, of course, the GTX category with Lamborghinis, BMWs, and so on. Let's not forget about the GT4 class as well, with one Mercedes AMG GT4. And then last, but definitely not least, the GTC1 class with the Porsche 911 Cup cars. It will be 3 straight hours of great excitement, great fights, but most importantly, great racing here at the Slovakia Ring. We are ready, and I hope you are too, for the GT Cup Series endurance race here at the Slovakia Ring.
Move it. Jakože pomesiť to užiť? Ktorý už mediálne známy. Rolling Start.CEST, does you know right? Dat is nog een lijst.
Ja, ja. Kip. And we are back in the commentary booth, getting ready for the final race of this long but very exciting day at the Slovakia Ring. The GT Cup Series endurance race is ready to take center stage on the Slovakian racetrack. It is round number 3 of the season. 7 stops on the calendar, 1 final champion to be decided. Of course, we will be right here, ready to talk you through it in these 3 hours that separate us from the end of the day. Naturally, of course, we have to enjoy what will be probably one of the most fascinating scenes and sceneries of the entire season, with the sunset, which will hopefully bless us by the end of the race. The grid was full of fans. Of course, this is a huge weekend for the Slovakia Ring. The FIA European Track Racing Championship, of course, being center stage for this weekend. It is the main event of the entire season. Then, of course, we've had plenty of racing this weekend with the GTC Endurance Challenge, TCI European Endurance, and Formula 4 Central European Zone. All here at the Slovakia Ring. This is not, of course, the only day of racing for this weekend. Saturday and Sunday are 2 full days of on-track action. This is just the beginning, and here you can see one of our cars, car number 44, with Miro and Mato Konopka in the Ligier JSP 320, prepared by ARC Bratislava. Of course, one of the best teams, not just in Central European zones, but also in the entire world for prototype racing. Plenty of experience from ARC Bratislava in a plethora of different championships. Of course, the GT Cup Series being one of them. Meanwhile, here is car number 500, the BMW from Gamota Racing with Antagigo at the wheel. We have 5 minutes on the board. So, in just 5 minutes, we will be starting the formation lap before heading into 3 hours of racing here at the Slovakia Ring. As we said before, we have 10 different cars and 6 different classes, getting ready to have some fun out here at the Slovakia Ring. We will be talking about all of these cars in great detail throughout these 3 hours. Of course, we will have plenty of time to do that, as the race will be long, but very enjoyable indeed. Here is the other ARC Bratislava car, this time in the GTX class, the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo from the Slovakian team, driven by Alan Konopka and Zdeno Mikulasko. This weekend, of course, the Konopka family being very much tied to the team in its recent years. We'll also be seeing one of the cars that has written history. There she is actually, the BMW M8 GTE, one of the best cars in the GTE class that took plenty of victories in the FIA World Endurance Championships. And naturally, of course, we are itching to see it race here at the Slovakia Ring as well. The BMW M8 being driven in the GT3 class by Gregor Žigo and Jesse Krohn. Krohn being split between two cars. That will be quite tough for him, but he will definitely be among the best drivers in this race. BMW M8 having a huge history. We'll talk about it more in detail in the future and in this race. Speaking of BMWs, we also have a BMW M4 GT3 Evo that we saw before. And then there's also space for GT4 machinery with this amazing Mercedes AMG GT4 prepared by the very experienced Express Auto Racing team with Vít Šmejkal, Patrik Kirov and Roman Novacek at the wheel. And now we're getting ready to start the formation lap. We'll wait for the 1 minute board. There is the siren sounds. They give us plenty of time to get ready for it. And now the grid will be cleared and the track will be ready to accommodate the next 3 hours of racing. We will see, of course, plenty of pit stops as well, with the different teams having to alternate in between drivers. And naturally, we will be bringing all the action from this race live here from GT Cup Series. It will be very interesting to see how the drivers handle the start, as we now go green for the formation lap. So this is an amazing chance, of course, to talk about the Slovakia Ring circuit, a 5.9 kilometer racetrack built in Orechová, Potôň, just 30 kilometers away from the nation's capital, Bratislava. The circuit features 14 corners, 7 to the right and 7 to the left. It is a track built in 2008 and opened for the first race in 2009, designed by architect Hans Roth. It is one of the most prominent circuits in Eastern Europe. It is definitely one of the most exciting ones as well, given that the track is by far one of the ones with the highest speeds, plenty of straight line speed as well as fast flowing corners, which of course suit some of these cars perfectly. I'm thinking, of course, of the prototypes, which have, of course, plenty of speed in the corners as well as oomph on the straight line. Though it won't be hard for us to see also some GT3 cars very quick around the circuit. Meanwhile, we go on board with the KTM Crossbow, number 26. You could hear the roar of the engine which is always very nice to see. The KTM Crossbow GTX driven by Jaroslav Honzik, one of the prime examples of how you can go from sim racing all the way to real racing. We'll of course talk about that in due course, but that is one of the best stories from this championship in recent years, and he is sharing his car with Viktor Mraz, just like last season. So the safety car is ready to go in the pits. Of course, giving plenty of room to our race leaders. On pole position, we have the ALK Bratislava prototype, the Duquesne of Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen. And then the two Konopkas, Miro and Mato, in the other prototype, the Ligier JS P320. As we now get ready to start things off here at the Slovakia Ring, the lights will turn from red to green, and we are officially underway for the 3 hours race here at the Slovakia Ring. It looks to be a good start for the two prototype cars, as the Lamborghini GTX as well seems to go around the outside, a car that has plenty of straight line speed, which will be definitely hard to fight against for the two prototypes, which are not the fastest on the straight line. But so far so good for the two D5 car class, as they are in first and second. We can see the rest of the pack as well racing towards the first couple of corners, and already a spin, and that is for the two Konopkas in the Ligier LMP3 car. A spin into turn 3, which could prove very costly in the fight for the win in the D5 standings. It was fighting hard against the other prototype, car number 33. I'm sure we'll have a replay very soon of that, but unfortunately for Miro and Mato Konopka, that wasn't the way they would want to start. I wonder, did they just lose the car in the braking zone, given that they weren't that close to car number 33 on the outside of turn number 3? But we'll see pretty soon. Meanwhile, it's nice to see that they are back at full racing speed, and they will be fighting for a comeback race at this point in time. You can see the timer, of course, up top, and that is everything that needs to be taken into account. And yes, they just lost the car on the braking, locked the rear tires, and that sent them into a spin. Not the easiest nor the best start to their race, but they have to go on, and they have to keep going if they want to, you know, come back into a possible and potential podium place. Meanwhile, the two BMWs, one against the other. These are the two BMW M4 GT3 cars. One of them, the one currently in front, part of the GT3 standings. That is the GT3 Evo of BMW, and behind the slightly older model, but with different modifications, and that is why the BMW M4 with the blue and grey livery is part of the GTX category. The two of them are currently fighting for what is third position in the overall standings, though of course they are part of two different classes, therefore not really in a fight against one another for championship purposes. But of course, this will be very interesting to see also the same philosophy of car, but in two different time frames in its lifespan. The newer Evo model in front and the older model at the back. But of course, let's not forget that the BMW currently in second position in this fight, so the one with the blue and grey livery has had some modifications to it, which is why it is part of the GTX class, which is a category reserved for those GT style model cars that do not comply to the actual regulations of GT3, GT4, GT2 and so on. That is the case, for example, for the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo of Adam Konopka and Zdeněk Mikuláško, that is currently in second position overall and first in the GTX standings. See a bit of flashing going on towards the second to last corner. That was entirely to try and put off their rivals, which is totally normal in this kind of case. But as you can see now, a move could come pretty quickly as the GTX BMW darts to the inside. Fortunately though for them, no moves so far, so they're staying back into fourth position. That is the number 79 of Greg Rodrigo and Jesse Krohn. Meanwhile, let's jump on board with Victor Mraz and Jaroslav Honzi. Car number 26, currently in 6th position. It is very nice to see it's on board. We will be seeing that quite a lot throughout this race. As now the two BMWs are still looking to make an impact in this race, fighting of course for 5th position at the moment. Car number 500 so far having the better of the other BMW. Meanwhile, up top, the other prototype, the one from ARC Bratislava Racing with the Duquesne car. Is still in front, but we are seeing the other prototype, the Ligier, quickly rising through the standings as it has now moved into what looks to be 6th position in the overall standings, just behind the two BMWs, which I'm sure will be dispatched pretty quickly. As you can see now by the beautiful drone shot, the two Bavarian cars racing towards turn number 1. From this angle you could actually see how long the radius of the corner really is. It is such a difficult track to master, especially with these long flowy corners. It needs to be taken at full speed if you want to take as much advantage as possible. Meanwhile, the Konopka prototype car moves into 5th position, overtaking the BMW. Of course, this is not an actual fight given how quicker the prototypes actually are compared to the GT3 and GTX class. And here goes the Ligier, which actually could put the first BMW, the M4 GT3 Evo, the white one, in danger of losing the other position, given that the GTX BMW of Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn was looking to be very, very dangerous up the inside of its fellow GT BMW. We'll see who has risen on top from that fight. And that is the GTX car. Here they go, just in front. So 2 positions lost for car number 500 in the space of a couple of 100 meters. That's not to worry, of course, given that the race is still very long and they are part of 2 different classes. So the comeback for Miro and Maciej Konopka keeps on going. They're up into 4th position at the moment with car number 44. Car number 33 is currently in 1st position. We will be checking over the lap times to see just how quick they are lapping. We'll do so in a moment after the onboard with car number 26. always very nice to see the onboard from one of the cars. Especially the KTM Crossbow, given that it is a car with a very complicated philosophy to wrap your head around, most notably the roof of the car coming off from the front to let the drivers out of the car. We'll be seeing that, I'm very sure of it, during the pit stop window. We'll have plenty of pit stops to talk about throughout this race. Of course, 3 hours is a very long time, and therefore we'll see plenty of mandatory stops throughout it. Also to see the different teams and the different drivers getting a stab at this circuit. And here is the KTM in a beautiful split screen. On one hand the onboard, and on the other one the fantastic shots at the Slovakia Ring. You can see how car number 26 takes each and every corner, full throttle through turn number 12, and now down towards turn number 13, finish yet another lap, which car number 44 has just done. Here is the prototype that is currently into 4th position, catching rather quickly to 3rd place, gaining a couple of seconds per lap. So far, the leading Duquesne prototype is the fastest out on track with a 1 minute 56.8. So far so good for them out on top. Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen. You can see also how quick the prototypes are at changing directions. Of course, having the drag that is necessary in order for them to fight through the corners. An LMP3 car that has recently got a lot of attention from the world stage with the new additions and the new engines into the back of them, of course, with the regulations that see them race in a plethora of different championships. For one, the Michelin Le Mans Cup as the prime category of that series, then the European Le Mans Series, the Asian Le Mans Series, and different endurance championships that have made and left their mark on European and global stages as well. A car there in just a little over a week will be in Le Mans for the Michelin Le Mans Cup, a historic endurance race there as well for what is the prime event for these kind of cars. It is a perfect choice, of course, for those who are just starting out with prototype racing, and that is why they are so popular, especially in Europe. Meanwhile, the GTX car of ARC Bratislava is still going strong in 2nd position. Here it is, the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, car number 33. It is, of course, one of the better looking cars. I mean, it is Italian, and we all know that great supercars are usually from Italy, but Lamborghini really have left a huge mark on GT3 racing with its Huracan, a car that has since pretty much this year been replaced by a brand new model. Lamborghini working really hard with the new GT3, with the Temerario. Lamborghini having used the Huracan for over 10 years. Now it has earned a well-deserved rest for prime GT3 competition. The Temerario being chosen by plenty of teams throughout the world, though of course there are still plenty of customer racing teams that are still working with the Huracan, which is a tried and true option. And it is kind of funny to see cars such as the Huracan, in this case with a GTX style modifications on it, tackle tracks like the Slovakia Ring, where GT3s usually can't shine as much as they want to, given that mechanical grip is tested quite harshly here. But they are, of course, very nice to look at and to drive, especially. GT3 racing has become a staple of world motorsport right now, with plenty of championships using them to a great extent. Even historic series such as DTM has switched over to GT3 racing, which is probably the most popular of series with tin tops and car racing around not just Europe but the entire world. And it is always very nice to see some of them here in the GT Cup series as well. The Lamborghini is so far doing a great job, staying in second position, now lapping the Mercedes AMG GT4 of Vitsmaker, Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek. Of course, lap traffic will be another huge factor of this race. Granted, of course, it isn't as huge of a factor with just 10 cars out on track, but of course it will be very hard for our drivers to navigate traffic in the twisty sections of the circuit. I'm thinking, of course, of Sector 2, for example, with plenty of slow corners and a little chicane and other little bits and pieces that make this track, of course, very good to race at, but also very challenging to lap people on. We have a first sighting of car number 33 now, with the leading Duquesne D08 LMP3 car, part of the D5 prototype class. They are currently leading things off with Thomas Ambiel, Mats Kedos Larsen. And meanwhile, here is the lovely BMW M8 GTE. GTE racing was the staple of GT cars, especially in the World Endurance Championship up until a few years ago, before that championship too switched over to GT3 racing. It was sensational to see those cars having a blast out on track. They were super fun to drive and very difficult as well. Only there for the top of the GT drivers, especially around the entire world. We had plenty of fights as well as marvelous racing, and we had plenty of cars as well in that category. The first one that comes to mind, of course, is the hugely popular Ford GT that won Le Mans back in 2016. BMW, of course, with its M8, the Ferrari 488, and the Corvette Z06 GTE, and of course, last but definitely not least, the Porsche 911 RSR GTE, with quite possibly the best sound a racing car has ever made. But it is always great to reminisce on those times, and seeing this car right here is such a pleasure, honestly, to be able to see it driven this time around by Gregor Gigot and Jesse Krohn. And meanwhile, the Mercedes AMG GT4 also getting some love from the cameras. Vitsmenko, Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek at the wheel of this car. It's always very nice to see GT4 machinery on track as well. A category that this weekend is also present with the GTC Endurance Challenge, a brand new championship that started off this year and that has raced today as well. They will do so tomorrow too. It is the other endurance style format racing that we have this weekend, other than, of course, this 3-hour race. And now for the first time we can see also the GTC 1 class, the Porsche 911 Cup car of Tomasz Lach and Katarzyna Balawajder. Car number 2, that is, currently in second position in class. with Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter having the lead so far with a 37-second gap on second place. One of the most difficult cars probably to drive, the Porsche 911 Cup car. It has received a new upgrade kit this year. This is the older model, naturally, but the Porsche Super Cup championships from all over the world have introduced the brand new car as well. I'm thinking of Porsche Carrera Cup Germany, the Porsche Super Cup Series, of course. But this car, widely known as one of the most difficult ones to drive with no assists whatsoever for the drivers. It is kind of hard, of course, to learn this car as well. Very easy to spin with it, as it has plenty of power and little to no traction control. Here is the other one. This is an even older model of the car. This is the number 846 Porsche. This one was the model that up to the 2020s was used widely in the Porsche Super Cup cars championships, but they have now ceased to be the reference point, at least for that category, though of course it is very nice to see them out on track in weekends like this one. Meanwhile, the 33 Duquesne has moved into, or has stayed into first, but has moved up the order on track after lapping one of the Porsches, the one from Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter. And here we are back with car number 500, and that is the BMW of Antal Gigot, Max Kranz and David Jan. The M4 GT3 Evo, of course, being one of the first models of modern GT3 racing. If we think about the introduction of this car in the early 2020s, it was the first real car with a new philosophy of GT style racing. It looked super modern at the time. Of course, it is one of the better looking and better sounding GT3 cars, but it has literally paved the way for new GT3 models, such as, for example, the Ferrari 296 GT3 and the Lamborghini Temerario, which we were talking about earlier during this race. BMW being basically a pathfinder in this sort of racing. Meanwhile, let's go on board once more with car number 26, that is the KTM Crossbow. We saw, of course, how complicated it was for the drivers to take the different corners here at the Slovakia Ring. They will need to nail, of course, the first round of pit stops, which is coming up pretty shortly as well, especially for those cars who are fighting against other cars. I'm thinking, for example, of the GTX category that it has 3 different cars, the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo currently in 2nd position, or the BMW M4 in the hands of Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn, and then last but not least the KTM Crossbow, which we are seeing right about now with car number 26. Alright. So we see now the Mercedes AMG GT4. Of course, dying to see who will be in first for the pit stop window, but naturally we will find that out in due course. So far the drivers are pushing very hard. I think it's also a great time to have a look at some of the lap times that our cars have been posting recently. So far, the quickest lap of the race has been set by the Duquesne prototype, car number 33, currently up into top spot. Thomas Ambio and Mads Kjelde Larsen doing a great job so far. Today, we're seeing some of the cars looking at potentially a sub 2-minute lap times. So far, 1:56.364 was the best lap time for Thomas Ambio. We also had 3 other cars dipping under the 2-minute mark. That was the other prototype of Miro Macho Konopka with a 1:57.6. Then the Lamborghini that we're seeing right now with a 1:58.8. And last but definitely not least, the number 24 of Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn, the other BMW M4 GT3, with a 1:59.9. Here we go with the Duquesne LMP3 entry. The leading car, of course, for this race so far. It would have been an amazing fight, I think, for P1 in the prototype standings, but unfortunately the ARC Bratislava pair of Miro and Macho Konopka spun in the very first lap. Meanwhile, Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Honzik once more on track. We'll go on board with the KTM crossbow. And here we can see the car from the outside. It is very beautiful, of course, the KTM crossbow, given that it is such a difficult car to drive and to learn. We know our drivers are very skilled, however, and both Mraz and Honzik have had plenty of time with this car in the last couple of years. GT Omega being one of the main sponsors that we could see on the side of the car. Here we go with the first pit stops. That is the BMW of Gamota Racing in the pits, and also the Porsche number 2. Pit stops, of course, are mandatory here in the GT Cup Series. And you can see other cars getting ready to come in. I think ARC Bratislava is getting ready for a pit stop, and that is in fact their GTX entry, car number 4, into the pit lane. Miro Konopka and Macho Konopka in the pits, refueling their Lamborghini. After that, we will be witnessing a driver change. We can see it right below the timer, which tells us that we still have 2.5 hours of racing. The Porsche as well, getting ready for the end of their stop. Same goes for the BMW. That is almost out of the pits as we speak. Meanwhile, here go ARC Bratislava with their pit stop. And here is the BMW number 500 leaving the pit lane. The Gamota Racing team being out here with one of the few BMW M4 GT3 Evos that have been lended to customer racing. That is, of course, the backbone of GT3 style championships. It's always very nice to see this kind of car. And meanwhile, also the Porsche 911 Cup car, the number 2 entry of Tomasz Lach and Katarzyna Balawajdar. They're doing a great job to stay in the fight for the GTC1 lead, though that, for example, is currently in the hands of Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter. So far, so good for the other ARC Bratislava entry, the GTX Lamborghini. They had a fantastic showing last year here as well in the endurance race, the very first one. We had the pleasure of commentating together when they almost got the overall win, beating their fellow LMP3 entry, though at the end of the day it was the LMP3 car who got the better of it. Meanwhile, here we go with another pit stop, this time the Mercedes AMG GT4. Car number 82. So far, having a good time out there for Express Auto Racing. As we see now with the other ARC Bratislava entry, the LMP3, we have cars of different classes very close to one another, which helps us see the difference as well in pace in between the two. That was the GTX BMW and the LMP3 ARC Bratislava Ligier. You can also see a bit of fog, I want to say, almost, towards turn number 2. Bit of gravel maybe kicked up by some of the cars. That is totally expected, of course, in such a long race, to have a few offs here and there. Meanwhile, the Mercedes is leaving the pits. Naturally, we have plenty of racing yet to come in these 2.5 hours. Once all of our pit stops are done, we will be giving you a roundout of the current results so far, as you're waiting for the last few cars to exit the pit lane. But so far, the number 33 Duquesne LMP3 prototype is in the lead, lapping faster than anyone else out on track. I mean, it was to be expected with car number 33, but we also wanted a bit of fighting between them and the other ARC Bratislava prototype, the Ligier that we're seeing right about now, though they have dropped outside of the top 3 after being there for quite a long time. Second position so far goes to car number 79 of Gregor Gigo and Jesse Krohn in the GT3 class. That is the BMW M8 GTE. Though these two cars are yet to pit, as I think
the Duquesne prototype will do so in just a few seconds. We'll see whether or not the M8 GT will follow suit, but meanwhile Adam Konopka and Zdeno Mikuláško keep on going. Here in the pits is also Vitor Mraz together with Jaroslav Honzik, and now we could probably see the historic latch from the KTM Crossbow Open. It is quite unusual for them and for this kind of car, as first of all we do have to wait for the refueling operations to be complete. And meanwhile, the leading Duquesne LMP3 prototype is in the pit lane as well. They have done a terrific job in the first 30 minutes of racing. That has to be said. But of course, the race is still very long, and therefore anything could happen. The BMW M8 is also in the pits. And now we're getting ready to witness the driver change for the KTM Crossbow. As we could see from its rear view camera that the Duquesne was getting ready to leave the track. Well, the pit lane actually. And here they go. Still retaining the lead, of course. And here is the open hatch for the KTM Crossbow. We were waiting for this one, that's for sure. But always lovely to see such a peculiar car in its natural habitat. And here we go with the open roof, basically. A reminder of what the KTM Crossbow used to be as well, with the particular open hatch car that we had the pleasure of seeing throughout the 2010s, before the new model came in a few years ago. A model that has raced in plenty of series, such as the 24-hour series by Creventic, and also some GT2 championships. Of course, the GT Cup Series being another one of those championships where this car has excelled in recent years. Here we go, out of the pit lane with the KTM Crossbow. Right behind the Mercedes AMG GT4. And of course, we have to remember how quick these cars are at putting their tires up to speed and into the right temperature window, which is of course not an easy task for the drivers, but cars have become really accustomed to doing that in the fewest minutes, seconds actually possible. Naturally, a lockup doesn't really work with it and doesn't help, but it is an endurance race. But at the end of the day, drivers are drivers and they want to push as hard as they can. Here is the Crossbow, car number 26. So far in 7th position. Now being lapped by the BMW number 500. And here you can see it from the onboard as well. It is very hard, of course, for the drivers to jump into a car that has been in anger for quite some time, 39 minutes to be exact. And, you know, the team, of course, expects them to be on pace right from the beginning, as a racing driver usually should, but it is very hard to gather their thoughts and their thought process into what would be a very fast out lap and then a very first flying lap as well. Usually in car racing, in-laps and out-laps are where the difference is made, especially in pit stop-based racing, such as this one, where a lot of time can be gained, of course, throughout situations like these. We see now the ARC Bratislava team looking at the staff, checking the fuel pumps. Here is the BMW M8, car number 24. The M8 is the only GTE car present here. It is unfortunately a class that has pretty much stopped being used. It was, of course, the staple of GT racing back in the World Endurance Championships a few years ago. But let's listen to the sound of the KTM. Or that's not. We will be doing that maybe later on. But the M8 GTE was by far one of the most winning GTE cars in the history of the category. The GTLM class being, of course, the category that I'm referencing. A car that was known for its width and length, and that had taken plenty of race wins in the, not just the World Endurance Championship, but also the IMSA Sports Car Championship, winning the 24 Hours of Daytona back-to-back in 2019 and 2020, with actually one of the drivers that we have on the entry list for this race, Jesse Crown, in 2020 with the team RLL. He drove with John Edwards, Augusto Farfus and Chaz Mostert at the time. It is also a car that fought long and hard in the World Endurance Championship, that had, of course, plenty of good results throughout its existence, but naturally we will be seeing plenty of action on track for them, even for this special race, with 2 hours and 17 seconds left on the clock. The M8 currently fighting for 6th position. Meanwhile, here the two other BMW models that we have out here today, the GT3 Evo with car number 500 with Antalgigo in the white livery, and then on the other hand the GTX entry with Denis Vajek at the wheel, currently in 6th place, car number 24 just in front. The two have fought long and hard for their spot on the grid. Meanwhile here at Bratislava, we say hi as well to the Gromka family and the team from Slovakia, the home team here at Slovakia Ring. Meanwhile, we almost see a move up the inside with car number 500, but wasn't to be for Antalgigo, Max Kranz and their teammate David Hahn at the wheel, with meanwhile the other LMP3 prototype car from ARC Bratislava, car number 44, taking another pit stop out of the way. 2 hours and 16 minutes left on the clock, and they are back underway. That didn't feel like a planned pit stop to me, honestly, but we'll know better in just a few minutes. With, as you can see now, the different cars in the LMP3 standings fighting. Now almost coming back into traffic is car number 44. Miro Konopka and Maciej Konopka at the wheel of the LMP3, the Ligier prototype that has had a rich history, of course, in recent years. We were expecting a huge fight between them and the Ducan G08 of Thomas Ambiel and Mats Kjelde Larsen. But I'm very pleased to say that I'm not the only one in the commentary box anymore, because on the left-hand side of myself, the one and only Antonio Caruccio. Hi, Antonio.
Ciao, ciao Daniele, really pleasure to be here. Lucky you, lucky me, lucky everyone had the chance to see this race. We are not even on 1/3 of this 3 hours endurance race. It's still amazing to see the battle on track. It's even quite historic to see this challenge between BMW, and unfortunately we lost some of the cars that were already battling, especially talking about the prototypes that were on top, but we got plenty of time to recover. And yeah, as you were saying, it's nice to see the battle around. This is an amazing track. I cannot wait to see the sunset later on. Perfect also to have a gin tonic, not for those are driving, but just for those are watching race from home, maybe us commentating. So yeah, unbelievable how this track can be also demanding in terms of management of tires, in terms of also reliability of the car, but I let you on the action.
We saw a move up the inside with car number 500, the white BMW M4 GT3 Evo, taking over from the other M4 out on track in the GTX class from Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn. It is very nice to see the difference, of course, on track between the two cars, the Evo version being the one that substituted the old M4 GT3 that just until a few seasons ago was the prime model for BMW in GT3 racing. And of course we also have the BMW M8 GT, which we were talking about before. It is very nice to see 3 different kinds of cars from BMW on the same track together.
3 kind of generation of car, 3 kind of models, because as you said, M8, it's a GT version, which was the version who was racing in Le Mans, the ones that was called GT2 once upon a time, when you were still going to kindergarten. But yeah, it's nice to see the evolution, because we still have the Huracan, and if we think that now Lambo is working with the Temerario, it's basically 3 models far from what we are seeing now on track, and the evolution of this car, talking about it technically, talking about aero, but specifically also about the biggest change Lambo had in this 2026 Temerario is the engine, because this car had a starting base on the R8 from Audi, while the Temerario is the first project that Lambo developed itself. Konopka, the Konopka family, and IRC Bratislava was one of the teams who joined the Huracan project, starting from the Super Trofeo since the beginning. And it's also good and clever, let me say, both sides, from the organization part and team part, have the chance to race with those cars, because you have, of course, spare parts, you can manage by your own the assistance, and you can still keep going. Those cars are very reliable in terms of using. Most of those cars had already the chance to race and win in 24-hour series. As we said about the M8, of course, talking about the 24-hour of Le Mans, but we will never forget BMW racing in IMSA, with also those that came the quite historic first stage of Meme, with those M8 getting much huge, larger and big than the other cars. And is, let me say, from one end, such a shame that M8 hadn't the chance to keep going, because also when the new M4 won the Age Le Mans series, the title with Nick Katzberg 3 years ago, there was somehow the chance for the last 3 years ago, 24-hour of Le Mans, for the GT, before the GT3 joined the field of LM GT3 in WEC, having the chance to see for the last time a private project with this car specifically, because it's one of the few still left in Europe. Spoiler alert, unfortunately it didn't happen, but yeah, it was still nice to think about this and to see the evolution of the GT cars and this kind of racing together, having 2 BMW together and the old version of Huracan. It's still something unique that we can find, just from what I remember in the short history of motorsport, in this endurance race in Slovakia Ring.
I mean, we talked about the BMW M8 before, but we'll talk about it later on, after another onboard with the KTM Crossbow that maybe we're listening to in just a few moments' time. Not just right now, but Of course, the M8 being one of the most winning GTE projects as well, winning the 24 Hours of Daytona back-to-back in 2019 and 2020. And then, of course, having plenty of other on-track battles between the IMSA Sports Car Championship and the FIA World Endurance Championship in recent years. Another category that has taken the motorsport world by storm is definitely LMP3. We were talking about it earlier today, but naturally the prototype class growing in popularity year after year. Of course, the LMP3 being basically the starting point for prototype racing around Europe in a plethora of different championships, with ETRC Bratislava bringing their own Ligier out on track. It is, of course, a car that they have used for quite some time now, and that they have competed with, especially on the world stage, plenty of times in recent years.
This is technically the second version, because the JSP3 was from 2015, the first model. This was the second one because it's from the 2020. It's a little evolution, let me say. Still had the old engine, while we remember now the new V6 is racing in both Michelin Le Mans Cup and ELMS, while those old cars may run just in championship like these, in this kind of race, but as well in the Prototype Cup, which allow to race the old generation of this kind of cars. It's such a shame that LMP3 hadn't a chance to be part of the Le Mans entries, because before the start of the Hypercar and LMDH project, there were quite huge talks about the chance to put next to LMP2 also the entry of LMP3, as is still happening in the IMSA Championship for some endurance races. So there was a huge talk in Europe about the fact that LMP3 could join the 24 Hour of Le Mans and the WEC, but then luckily or unluckily, that depends on which point of view you want to see. Let me say, in terms of action on track, of course, unluckily, because LMP3 is one of the funny cars that we had the chance to see on track, because it's a small prototype, has huge power, because it's a very powerful car, and it's quite easy for the drivers to drive, which allow many gentleman drivers to get confident and used to this kind of car. On the other hand, of course, if we think that we had the huge amount of manufacturer that we got involved with the LMDH and the hypercar product, of course, we cannot be sorry or afraid of the fact that LMP3 is not on the field. But never say never, who knows? We've seen amazing battles in Asia Le Mans Series and European Le Mans Series and Michelin Le Mans Cup with the old version of this car. So maybe, who knows, that the new generation might maybe on one day join also the historic race in La Salle.
And of course, the Ligier is not the only LMP3 prototype out on track. The Ducati D08 is currently leading things off with car number 33, Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen still in front. The last lap a 2-minute 2.4, probably some lapped cars in the way, given that they usually lap in the 1-minute 56s and 57s. The gap of their nearest rivals, a 16.3 second gap over the GTX Lamborghini, currently in second position. We talked about this before as well. Last year they had a huge chance of winning it all, actually, which was incredibly it was an incredibly powerful race from them, from car number 4 of ETRC Bratislava, the Lamborghini part of the GTX class given its modifications. But of course, it was a huge fight between them and the Ligier prototype from the same Slovakian team. This year they are bringing also the Ducati D08 to the table, which is quite possibly the other big name in LMP3 competitions as of right now. Of course, they're not the only ones to do and compete in these kind of categories, but of course, if we talk about Ligier, it is very difficult not to talk about Ducati as well.
You know what's also huge on the table?
What is?
The history of this track in international racing, because I've been lucky enough to come in here racing for the Blancpain GT Series almost 12 years ago, when the Sprint Series was born from SRO, and Slovakia Ring was one of the summer meeting of the season, and it was amazing to come racing here in Slovakia Ring. Actually, to me, was the first time in coming around the area and discovering Orechová Potôň. I hope I said in the proper way. And we had the chance to touch directly the passion of people from Slovakia and Slovakia Ring and Bratislava for racing, and then also the World Touring Car had the chance to came racing here with the new version of the TCR specific, so from when TC1 left, and the World TCR had the chance from 2018 to 2021 to race actually in Slovakia Ring, and was amazing. Then, of course, has always been a huge part of the field, the ETRC, so the tracks that we have also this weekend together, and having this endurance racing, which is almost an happy hour appointment for all the summer people arriving in the middle of June. It's something really nice. We see some dust, so I don't know if someone went out, maybe Dani, because there is some gravel up to there as well. Also the sunlight is changing a bit, but yeah, I guess there was some maybe mistake, because turn 1 and turn 2 are very tricky and demanding with those kind of cars, because we have seen during the day Formula 4, which was definitely easier because of the low power of the cars, and so you can approach, I wouldn't say full, but almost getting full, both the two corners, turn 1 and turn 2. And then what is very, also here we have a Porsche on the gravel, but luckily was able to come back on track.
Yeah, that was the Porsche 911 Cup car that is currently leading the class from Babao and Rafael Reiter. They're still in the lead after this small off, though they are, of course, a bit behind their rivals as well, as you can see them right now near one another out on track, the two different Porsche Cup cars. Maybe there's even a bit more issues on that. We can see a replay now thanks to the lovely work of the camera guys, and yeah, just misjudged it a bit in turn number 13 with the other Cup car up the inside, and it wasn't to be for both of them.
I take the chance just to maybe give a kind of interpretation of what happened. First of all, we are almost next to the first hour of the race, so also concentration might be something that we need to take into account, considering how difficult it is to drive for drivers in a track like that, where you always have to keep pushing and being with the pedal on the throttle. Then the change of light, because every lap the sun is getting down, and so you change your reference. He was also checking the mirrors, so maybe misjudge a bit, which was the breaking point. And then yes, of course, after one race also tires now are already on the limit, because Cup technically has the chance to cover the slot of 65 minutes like all the GT3 for the fuel, but usually races are very shorter, because the longest race about Cup we have around is about 50-55 minutes, so we are now definitely over that limit, because we are about 75 minutes racing now. So those are all things that we need to take into account, thinking why the reason we have of this little mistake, let me say, because in the end was not huge, nor the damage, because at least it maybe just scratched a bit the floor. But yeah, those Porsche are made for huge battles, as we see in all the Carrera Cup. I think, for example, Germany, which is the one together with a Porsche Super Cup, who has the new developed model of the 2026. Those are cars with some history a bit in the back, but also for these are very strong cars, because the newest car, we got a lot of aero, we got a lot of developments who bring those cars to be very fragile, especially when there is some rubbing or some direct contact or incident on track, while those cars, this one, if I'm not wrong, it's from 2016 as last homologation, so this was one of the cars who gave the, let me say, huge historic battles in the Carrera Cup.
Meanwhile, we see a replay of what happened on lap number 1, and that is the spin for the Ligier JS P320 of IRC Bratislava. That is why the two prototypes are much further away from one another compared to what we were used to seeing, especially in qualifying. And this is instead the mistake from car number A46 that we were talking about just a few seconds ago, which actually aided car number 2 to reach the top of the GTC1 standings, with Tomasz Lach and Katarzyna Balawajder in first position. Meanwhile, that is naturally the change in the lead for the Porsche Cup cars. Car number 2 now in front of car number A46, though everything is still to play for, with a little over 2 hours remaining. We're approaching the first third of the race to be over, which means that we will have 2 more hours of fun and excitement on this circuit. Meanwhile, we can see the KTM crossbow having, in just a few seconds, to let through the Duquesne. We will see that from the onboard of the KTM. And now up the inside goes the Ducati D08 car, the number 33, which is currently in the lead of the race.
Ducati, which is one of the latest manufacturer joining the LMP3 field, Ducati, which is still involved as team in LMP2 in the LMS and joining the 24-hour of Le Mans. French manufacturer for sure, which changed a bit his technical asset for the 2026 season. Is now managed from Air Race GP, a team which I know you know very well, as you are one of the maximum experts in terms of feeder series and single seaters. So it's a French team from Thibaut Merindol, who is a French engineer who developed his own team on the last 25 years. A team who is winning in Italian Formula 4, who is racing and winning as well in the Formula Regional European Championship, and they took after the title of Michelin Le Mans Cup in 2025 also the 2026 challenge. They are racing with a very interesting lineup in the Pro-Am in European Le Mans Series, because they have Giorgio Roda, who is an Italian driver. They have this magic girl, who is Dorian Penn, girl who had the chance to win the Formula 1 Academy, who was one of the Iron Dames as well. A girl who had the huge privilege and responsibility to be one of the first drivers to set the way for women in motorsport. So she had the chance to be back in LMP2 with Ducati this season in 2026, together with Richard Verschoor, Dutch driver coming from the experience in Formula 2. So was nice. Also, was saying about Dorian that she had already technically the chance to race also in WEC, taking place of Prema drivers when they were working for the development of Lamborghini project in the Iron Links together with the SG63, who unfortunately had only 1 year of life in WEC, and Dorian was taking place for Bortolotto and Cardarelli when there were some clash commitments for the two drivers, and so it was a nice return for Dorian with the LMP2 car.
Formula 1 Academy drivers that we have this weekend are on track in Matilda Paz, who raced in Formula 4 Central European Zone earlier today, and will do the same tomorrow on Sunday for races 3 and 4 of the Central European Zone Formula 4 Championship here at the Slovakia Ring. Matilda Paz, who won in Canada race number 2 of Formula 1 Academy this year with Prema, and therefore we can just see how competitive these drivers can be also in regional and international championships all over Europe, and not just Europe, given the win at the Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, Canada from Matilda Paz a couple of weeks ago. She was mighty quick this weekend as well. And speaking of females in motorsport, we have one at the top of the GTC1 standings right now, with Katarzyna Balawider at the wheel of the number 2 Porsche, which is currently in the lead of its category and growing said lead over Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter in car number 846. And meanwhile, here we go with the BMW M8 GT, which we talked about profusely before. The big BMW fans, of course, know this car from the late 2010s to the early 2020s, and it is one of the better looking GT style cars coming from recent years. Its width and length, of course, being the main characteristics of said car, but of course its performances have been second to none in many occasions throughout the years.
Did you notice we are less than 2 hours body on board? I don't want to ruin the sound, the music of the crossbow, but I was saying we are less than 2 hours from the end. What was interesting, in my humble opinion, if you allow me to say, was to see how drivers manage the overtake when they got overtaken in this case, because we have seen how there was the camera pointing the car in the back, so the driver has the clear idea on where the car is going. He knew that he would have had the chance to get the overtake done, so he didn't close the door, because it was even, let me say, a bit stupid closing the door with 2 hours left, less than 2 hours left. So it's been a clever way to manage the situation from the crossbow, and as well now you have the chance to follow the Lambo from behind, and it helps also to save a bit of fuel, because in terms of endurance racing as well, following getting the toe in the slipstream from a car who is opening the area in front of you might help to save maybe something like 1 lap at the end of the stint in Slovakia Ring, because as we say, it's a track where you go quite high on the gradation tires, because the second sector is one you have to drive a lot the car, so you need to force a lot on your tires, as well as the long straights in first and last sector. You have to use a lot of power, and so you use a lot of fuel as well. So it's not easy. It's not easy to find the right compromise to manage the strategy with this number of cars on track. It's also quite complicated to manage to have a safety car or a red flag or whatever. Now I say, let's see what will happen in the last 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, technically, race control will let the drivers free to race, and let me say, this is also one of the reasons why the drivers like to attend this kind of endurance racing, because they can get fully focused on push on the limit all the time. They don't need to check for track limits, so they got the chance to push until the end of their stint. For those, all of them changing drivers, and I guess you said already, we got cars with 3 drivers line up, some others with only 2 drivers. For a 3 drivers line up, it's quite easy, because when you get in to change tires and set fuel, you just change the driver. It's a bit more complicated for those who have only 2 drivers, because you need to manage a little bit better the engine consumption, just because you need to find the right slot to don't lose a lot of time on track. And this is one of the situation I was talking before about the strategy, thinking about saving tires and saving fuel.
We saw the KTM Crossbow being one of the very last cars to pull into the pit lane at the end of the first pit stop window. Therefore, we are definitely expecting them to extend a little bit longer. Now they are currently into what looks to be a solid 6th position. In 3rd place in the GTX standings, we have some cars in the pits. Speaking of the pit stop window, we have the leading GTC1 Porsche, the number 2 of Tomasz Lacz and Katarzyna Balawajder, while also having one of the BMWs who is currently pulled in into the pit lane, though it doesn't look like a pit stop for now, as the car has been put into the actual garage. So that isn't what they were looking for. That is, in particular, the GTX entry of Denis Vajek and Jesse Krohn, that was currently in 7th position, car number 24. Meanwhile, the other BMW, the M4 GT3 Evo, is changing all 4 tires. That is car number 500 with Antal Gigo, Max Kranz and David Hahn behind the wheel. We had a driver change for them as well, as they head into the 2nd hour of racing, nearing the halfway stage, basically, of this endurance race, with the BMW looking quite strong in the GT3 field. GT3 field that is only populated by BMWs, so we are certain of which brand will take the win in that category. We just have to wait and see whether it will be the M4 GT3 Evo that is currently leaving the pits, or if it will be the M8 GTE of Gregor Gigo and Jesse Krohn. Meanwhile, we also have the ARC Bratislava prototype coming in, and I think they are also pulling into the garage, but we saw them having a bit of trouble throughout the race itself, spinning out on lap number 1 and having an unplanned pit stop around 25 minutes ago. So it wasn't smooth sailing from them right from the get-go, and car number 44 has now pitted and is probably indefinitely staying in the pits as of right now, but we jump on board with the KTM Crossbow, who's still on the track. BMW M4 GT3 Evo from Gamota Racing has just left the pits. They are in the current outlap and in the 2nd sector of this racetrack. Of course, it is quite difficult for drivers, especially with changing conditions visibility-wise, to get accustomed to the new conditions, trying to get up to speed as much as possible. Of course, talking about those drivers who are jumping in the car for the first time, perhaps, in this race. That could also be one of the factors coming in to change the outcome of this particular endurance race, as Canada 500 has now moved into the top 3 behind the GTX Lamborghini that we are seeing right now. Some sparks flying from the back of the car as it bounced on the hill into turn number 3. A hill that was slightly modified after a few cars were actually taking off a couple of years ago, and that is why we have a bit of a less steep hill to climb, especially in that little section of the car. Of course, this circuit having plenty of elevation changes, being precisely what this track has been loved for by teams and drivers as well, being quite a lot of fun to drive around here. That's what the drivers have been telling us throughout not just this weekend but recent seasons as well. Of course, the Slovakia Ring being a staple of the GT Cup Series and all the other Eastern Europe championships such as Formula 4 CEZ that has come out here this weekend, but it is also attracting some of the most important championships out there in international competitions. I'm thinking, of course, of the FIA European Track Racing Championship, which is racing this weekend alongside other series such as TCR European Endurance and the GTC Endurance Challenge. Cars are now starting to get ready for the second half of the race. Meanwhile, here are the 2 leading cars with the LMP3 of Thomas Anviel and Mads Kjede Larsen and the GTX Lamborghini of ARC Bratislava. Speaking of ARC Bratislava, you'll see the 2 Konopkas and the Konopka family chatting away. Of course, not the most relaxed of faces after what looks to be a retirement. But meanwhile, up the inside goes the Lamborghini GTX car, which is a change of the overall lead for car number 4, which has moved into first position. And that is exceptional work from ARC Bratislava. So from the defeat of the LMP3 prototype to the success of the GTX Lamborghini. Of course, it is still very early to call it a win, but it is definitely nice to see the GTX Lambo being up into first position. And the Ducan prototype will have to regroup to try and go on the attack, but their pace has dropped quite significantly in this second half of the race so far. But of course, it's still very long and anything can happen. Now 9/10 separating the 2, but it really does look like the Lamborghini has a bit of pace over the Ducan at this moment in time. You can still see the Konopkas chatting away in the box. Fortunately, this definitely wasn't the end that they were wishing for, but naturally the GT3 and GTX categories have enjoyed plenty of racing throughout these past few months, especially in the GT Cup Series. And the GTX car has now moved into the lead, which is definitely not what they expected, but they'll take it.
I put another fact on the table. I'm not George Russell, but I still try. The fact that we now are facing the first huge drop of temperature since the beginning of the day, because the sun is going down and the sunset is for sure coming here in Slovakia Ring, and drivers and teams have now to face a change of temperature and a change of pressure as well on the tires. So those who had the chance to come already in for the pit, of course, work both on who put the new set of tires, also working on the pressure of the new or used set of tires, because not necessarily anyone now is using a new set of tires, because the track temperature is improving, and by the end of the race, in the last hour of the race, we will have the lowest temperature. This means also we will have less degree on the degradation, in terms of use of the car, and less degree in terms of number for the temperature of the truck, of the tire, of the air. So this will definitely help in terms of being more conservative. And for those who are pushing and checking, for example, for the fastest lap, this will come for sure in the last hour of the race. Not because fuel is getting used, because with the refueling every hour you got the same amount of fuel, but because the atmosphere and the track conditions which are going to improve as well. Having so much car running for 3 hours, also the line will be more and more clear lap by lap. On the other hand, having overtakes or lapping cars might be more tricky, because on the outside you're gonna have some pieces of used tires or some gravel coming from some mistake, as we said before, and as well somebody, I hope, is having dinner, because yeah, I guess, I mean, the time is almost this one.
Yeah, whether you're in your happy hour or getting ready to have dinner. I mean, it's always 5 p.m. somewhere, right? So we're definitely
Where
hoping
did you
that
learn this?
from someone very wise, I think. But of course, if those who are now having dinner are yet to drive, they will not be drinking. Before getting in the car, with 1 hour and 45 minutes left, we saw the Mercedes-AMG GT4 drivers getting ready for a pit stop, and that is the Express Auto Racing Mercedes driving off into the sunset and into the distance. Meanwhile, we're back with the Ducati D08 prototype, car number 33, with the Rinaldi Racing livery. They're currently in second position after being overtaken by Adam Konopka and Gianni Nicolafco at the top of the overall standings. The two cars, though, are part of two different classes, therefore they're still in the lead of their respective categories. The GTX class for the Lamborghini and the D5 prototype class for the Ducati. And here is the GTX Lambo, car number 4, which has plenty of power in that engine of theirs, but of course quite quick in the corners as well. They have looked to be the quickest entry on a straight line throughout this entire weekend. Of course, suffering compared to the much faster LMP3 prototypes in the corners, but the two things even each other out quite well in a racetrack such as the Slovakia Ring. Meanwhile, hard work being put on the LMP3 prototype down at IRC Bratislava in the Ligier JSP 320 that is currently being worked on in the pits. Maybe IRC Bratislava wanting to finish the race with that car despite the time lost in the last few laps. It has lost now 5 laps compared to the leading car, which is the sister Lamborghini that we're seeing right now, with the gap compared to car number 33 increasing to 5.8 seconds in the meantime. But I think that gap just ought to grow larger and larger as the laps go by, given that the Lamborghini is currently lapping a couple of seconds quicker than the Ducati. Meanwhile, troubles are not over for our cars, as the Porsche that was once leading the GTC1 standings is now being checked in the front bay. Unfortunately, not what the MZR team was looking for. We're of course hoping that they can go back to full speed racing under green flag conditions very shortly, but fortunately this looks like an unplanned stop that is going to cost them quite some time, therefore helping the other Porsche, the number 2, though they are still in the pits as well. So not the easiest hour for the Porsche Cup cars. Currently in the pit lane with Bob Bau and his teammate Rafael Reiter, the Austrians from Motorsport Center Reed, waiting to see whether their car could potentially get ready to start once more and go back to green flag conditions.
A team which was involved also last year in Monza for the support series of GT World Challenge, which means having team with such experience international put also this race in a high level of competition, because you know, having the chance to race all around Europe and the globe gives you the chance also to put yourself in situation to compare with the others, and it was quite important to be last week in such huge event as was GT World Challenge in Monza, as well being now involved in the CEZ Endurance here with the GT Cup in Slovakia Ring.
A team that is of course no stranger to the GT Cup series here in Eastern Europe. They have raced in the past few seasons, getting race wins under their belt and fighting for multiple championships over the years. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't look like a quick stop here for the number 846 Porsche, with Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter still in the pit lane. The same goes for car number 2, Thomas Lach and Katarzyna Ballaweider. The other Porsche so far in 10th position and second in the GTC1 class. And here you can hear the beautiful sound of the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo in the GTX class, driven by Adam Konopka and Zdeno Mikuláško, the current race leaders after the overtake on the Duquesne a few minutes ago. Speaking of minutes, we're just 10 minutes away from the halfway stage of this spectacular endurance race, and as we were talking about earlier, the sun is starting to set and we're definitely approaching that golden hour moment, which will definitely be a highlight not just of this weekend but of the season in general. The Lamborghini is now approaching the second twistier section of the circuit, marked by turns 10, 11 and 12. Here it goes, a hard braking zone into a left-hander. Meanwhile, operations continue down at Motorsport Centrum Ried, with car number 846 still in the pits, but currently holding P5. They're looking to see whether the engine can be restarted or not, and also working on the front bay of the car. In the meantime, a car that is instead running with no issues so far is number 33, with the Duquesne of Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen, currently in second position, with the number 33 still in a fight for the overall race lead, though the gap right now is around 8.7 seconds between them and the Lamborghini GTX, currently in the lead. We can see it in the top left of the screen. Meanwhile, on the bottom right, the Porsche is still waiting for their team to finish working on it. Adam Konopka and Zdeno Mikuláško still leading things off in the yellow GTX Lamborghini. Meanwhile, in the other classes, the GT3 standings are currently led by Antal Žigo, Max Kranz and David Jan in the number 500 BMW M4 GT3 Evo. And we are actually getting ready to see the Porsche being put out on track once more, with Bob Bau and his experienced teammate Rafael Reiter getting ready to take the car out of the pits and once again onto the racetrack.
I might say they were maybe just changing some oil, because I mean looks like there was no main issue. If they are getting back, they were not working on the brakes, so it was not the oil brake. So yeah, maybe some engine oil and just be back to be on track, also because we are now 1 hour and 37 to the end. So yeah, might be also because, as we say, those cars, the Cup car, are basically planned to race for the maximum length stint of Cup series, which is maximum around 45-50 minutes. So whatever is over this, you of course need to refuel, but then the car usually are supposed to be back on the tent of the team and be checked and be ready for the day after. So what is, for example, the difference between prototypes and the Super Trofeo, which was basically a GT3 downgrade for the way how it was the concept of that car. For the Cup, sometimes might be a bit more complicated. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the Porsche had a huge technical problem, but yeah, they just fixed some oil and they will be ready to be back in action soon.
They're still in the lead of the GTC1 standings. The other car in that category seems to have retired, unfortunately, as Thomas Lach and Katarzyna Balawader are still in the pits and have now lost plenty of time compared to their rivals. Fortunately, there are a few cars who have suffered some issues and are back in the pits, but just like Motorsport Centrum Reed have working very hard, as you can see now, using a good old solution to fix things, and that is duct tape on the front splitter of the car, which was potentially damaged in that gravel trap runoff that the car visited a few minutes ago before pulling into the pits. But then, who knows, maybe we will have other cars joining the race once more, as we now welcome back the 846 on the fast lane in just a few seconds, and then out on the racetrack.
You know, there are basically two ways to fix a car.
One of them is with duct tape, as we saw.
And when you use it, when something is moving and it shouldn't. And when it's reverse, what you use?
It's a very difficult
WD-40.
question.
The lubricant.
Very true.
Yeah.
So you can get things that are stuck unstuck.
That's
usually what happens, right?
That's the basic rule. No? Does it move? Yes or no? And if it moves and it doesn't, you use the tape. If it doesn't and it should, use the WD-40.
In this case, it was the first option for the Porsche, but who knows? We still have 1 hour and 35 minutes of racing, so we know that anything can happen, especially on a racetrack, as the Porsche is now well and truly back up to speed as it rolls towards turn number 3 and the end of the first sector here at the Slovakia Ring.
You know which was the main color on the helmet of Jesse Cron when he was racing in Italian Formula 3 in 2010?
I actually don't.
Pink and green. More green than pink.
Very nice color combo. Not the usual that you see, but very nice.
You know, Finnish people always are a bit eccentric. So.
And he is definitely one of the most decorated drivers on the starting grid as well. We talked about the Finn before, one of the winners of the 24 Hours of Daytona with that BMW M8 GTE that we talked about now 30 to 35 minutes ago. And of course, a driver that boasts plenty of experience in not just car racing and sports car racing, but also open wheels, as we talked about right about now. But the Porsche is now into turn number 10. We saw basically the entire lap with the 846 that had just come out of the pit lane, as we are starting to see a bit of sunset coming towards the racetrack. I mean, it's not long until the sun sets, and we will be heading towards the end of this endurance race, but we are still yet to cross the halfway stage, which will happen in a little over 3 minutes, as now the Porsche is getting ready to be lapped from the Lamborghini that is still in the lead of the overall standings, as well as, of course, the GTX category. Alan Konopka and Zdeno Mikuláško at the wheel of that Lamborghini, which is, of course, a modified version of that GT3, hence the participation in the GTX standings for ARC Bratislava. Car number 4 currently close to the back of the Porsche, which will give way before turn number 2, and that was well done by Motorsport Centrum Reed and its drivers. Of course, leaving space for the much faster car approaching. The difference in lap time is around 10 seconds in favor of the Lamborghini, which went a bit wide into turn number 3, but given the 9.2 second gap, it is definitely allowed, as a slight mistake from Adam and Zdeno. Of course, concentration lapses are something that can happen, especially after 1.5 hours of racing, which is why the next 90 minutes will be very crucial for our drivers, as concentration will be definitely what could change things, especially in the standings. The Lamborghini being the sole GTX car, together with the KTM Crossbow, still out there. Speaking of KTM, we go on board with it right now. We saw a top speed of 250 kilometers an hour on the small straight that brought Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Honzik towards the second sector. Of course, the top speed around this track is much higher on the main straight that brings the drivers towards turn number 1, a place where the Mercedes-AMG GT4 that we are watching right now has just left, as it is approaching the end of the first sector into turns 2 and 3. Speaking of turn number 1, here we go with the Duquesne number 33 car that is currently in second position. They are starting to find the rhythm a little bit, lapping at around the 2-minute 2-second mark, which is the same pace that the leading Lamborghini is currently keeping. Car number 4, of course, driven by Konopka and Niculasco, being still in the lead, but Ambiel and Larsen are hunting them down, and if the first stint was in favor of the Duquesne, the second one has definitely been swaying in the way of the Lamborghini, but who knows, maybe that could change once more as we approach the second half of this race. We now see the drivers towards the second sector. This is the much slower and technical section of the circuit, as of course we have long straights, fast flowy corners, but also these slow sections that give us plenty of chances for overtakes, hard braking zones, and of course watching the potential of these cars in slow sections unravel as we are officially into the second half of this endurance race, as we now see the Porsche getting over one of the many hills of this racetrack and into turn number 10. Now the Lambo approaching one of the Mercedes, the GT4 entry of Express Auto Racing, who has left the door open on the outside on the actual racing line for the leading GTX Lamborghini that has lapped the Mercedes right about now, as we get ready to start lap number 44 of this race.
It's crazy how it screams V8 from Lambo.
It is by far one of the better sounding cars out there today, not just today actually, but in the entire world of motorsport.
What's your favorite?
The Porsche, of course, the 911. I mean, we talked about it before in the GTE class as well, being one of the better sounding cars, in my humble opinion, the best sounding car, probably. In recent years, especially in sports car racing, I mean, Lamborghini is definitely a close second, but nothing beats that Boxster B6 in my opinion.
I see. Pit stop.
Yeah, for the Duquesne number 33, we see some tires ready for the front, and of course refueling operations going on the left side of the car. Sounds about right as a strategy, of course, being a little over the halfway stage of the race. This is probably the second to last pit stop for the LMP3, which usually have this 40 to 45 minute window for stint length. That is why we're seeing them in the pits right now. A change of all 4 tires for Ambiel and Larsen, and then we will see them back out on track again for what will be the final 2 stints of this race. This is of course a perfect opportunity for them to gain some time back on the Lamborghini number 4 of Adam Konopka and Zdeno Niculasco, who will be staying out a bit longer for now. And also in the pits are the KTM Crossbow with Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Honzik, as the LMP3 leaves the pit lane and is getting ready to roar back to the racetrack in green flag racing conditions, as now the car rejoins the track just in front of the BMW M4 GT3 Evo. And meanwhile, here is the hatch open for the Crossbow, a change of driver between Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Honzik, and then a change of tires as well.
You know that the first version of this car had a quite huge Italian herd?
Really?
It was made from Dallara.
I mean, one of the staples of car manufacturers, especially in prototype racing, Dallara. Plenty of collaborations throughout its existence, especially in recent years. Another crossbow pivoting towards the closed hatch model after being a car without a roof for a long time. Now we see the driver change coming to a close, and then the roof will follow suit before seeing the car back out on track for the final 85 minutes of racing. They were holding down 4th position so far in the overall standings and 2nd place in the GTX class as the KTM gets ready to rejoin the circuit from the fast lane.
The GT2 version of this car was involved last week in Monza for the start of the European Series. We've seen how crucial is, first of all, how to set when you put the steering wheel on, so everything needs to be perfect because otherwise you might have some electric issue. And then now it's important to move the kill speed once you enter the pit lane, to put on and to put off while you get out. So it's very important to be on the earliest possible to leave to try to gain advantage. And this is another pit for the Lambo. The tires, of course, coming. And as we said, now we will see maybe one of the fastest lap of the race for them, because track conditions are improving in terms of temperature, because it's getting lower, more fresh compared to before. Of course, they will check all the pressure, so they will go on a lower bar compared to before, or PSI, I guess. Nowadays, you see the car goes up, just one mechanic with the gun to fix the tire. Better for the cameraman to move. And the engine can be switched on just once the car is touching the ground with all the 4 wheels fit. And now it's time for the second stint.
Pretty much a perfect pit stop for ARC Bratislava, as they now rejoin the track rather slowly, I might add. But they're surely making their way back towards the racing line, and here they go back at full speed.
Or maybe there was some issue with the pit limit button.
Yeah, we saw the lights that usually go on during the pit stop window being still on after leaving the pits for a short time. Meanwhile, the Mercedes AMG GT4 car is also in the pit lane. As you can see now, the detail of fixing the tires to the car itself, as the number 82 entry is through into yet another stint.
Yeah, still manual, let me say, with the wheel nuts getting fixed on the Mercedes, and Michelin tires, if I'm not wrong.
It was very interesting to see, especially the nuts and bolts being fixed to the car. Of course, something that has changed in recent years for plenty of categories, not for this specific GT4. As we now once again can enjoy the split screen with what is actually a fight for second position in the overall standings, with the Ducan going to the inside of the BMW, though of course the LMP3 prototype has done one more stop compared to the M4 GT3 Evo, which has gave way pretty easily in turn number 3. Meanwhile, pit stop operations continue down at Express Auto Racing with the Mercedes AMG GT4 still out on track and leading the GT4 standings, with Vitschmaker, Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek alternating with each other at the wheel of that specific car. can see the Ducan navigating the slowest part of the circuit across turns 10, 11 and 12, with the natural light becoming dimmer and dimmer as we move closer to sunset. We've already seen some redness in the sky, especially into the second sector where the sun is setting. And of course now headlights are required for the second half of the race.
We have seen on the onboard, Danny, drivers releasing the end when they are on the straight, also to avoid cramps during the stint, because for over 1 hour driving and having to keep those racing cars, not like we take road cars, very bad, personally saying as a driver, but luckily I do something else for living. And so we see how important it is to consider and know which is the limit of your body, so release sometimes also for circulation of the blood in the end. So it's quite important for the drivers, and those on board are quite helpful because give us the chance to be inside the cockpit and see what happens.
It was also very nice to see how, we'll say this after the turnout on board,
We've seen completely different noise before, no? In a sector where you have a lot of corners and with the paddle shift, or you have to go up and down with the shift. And while when you are on the straight in the same way, as you call up the next gearbox, the next gear on the box, you let it take some air, which is quite used also. Well, not anymore nowadays with the colors of car, but when there were prototypes, open prototypes, it was happening a bit the same, especially in Le Mans with the long straights. Drivers were going to take some fresh air, and this is what's happening now with the open wheel cars. So with Formula 4, Formula Regional, Formula 2, Formula 3, on the long straights, sometimes you see also Formula 1 in very hot races like Singapore, for example, drivers getting to take some fresh air on the gloves.
And it was also very nice for those who have stayed with us since the very beginning of this race to actually see the difference in approach for the same driver, as the KTM Crossbow has now had 2 driver changes in between the 2 drivers, and we've definitely seen a difference in approach compared to the start of the race, where driving was a bit more on the limit. Whereas right now, of course, things have settled in quite a bit, and the drivers are especially managing the situations between the fuel, tires, and of course fatigue coming in as another huge factor, as we were saying before. Of course, they need to be quite prepared for that coming to play, especially in what will be the last hour of racing, which will be approaching in less than 18 minutes time. Beautiful drone shot that helped us see the entire slow section of the Slovakia Ring as a whole, whereas now we hear the roar of the Ducan engine. As we can see now, much darker than before out there on track. That is why headlights are becoming very helpful for the drivers to spot those apexes much better. And I think this will be an even bigger topic in the next few minutes, in the next hour for sure, as now we see the BMW number 500, the M4 GT3 Evo, and the KTM Crossbow, 2 of course different classes one against the other, and it's very nice also to see the difference in approach between the two different cars and how they need to be handled in order to be taken to the absolute limit here at the Slovakia Ring. The crossbow now making its way through towards turn number 3. Staying in the middle of the racetrack to carry as much speed as possible. We saw before how the drivers were trailing off the throttle to try and find the right bite moment to put the traction down and find the most speed out of the corner itself. Whereas with the GT3 cars usually are a bit more aggressive on the throttle given the traction control and all the driver assists that they are used to having. That car requiring a bit of a rougher style of driving compared to something a bit more delicate such as the KTM crossbow, and of course, for example, the LMP3 prototypes that we've seen so far. Unfortunately, just one of them still out on track, the Ducane number 33, currently in second position. This is instead the Lamborghini GTX that is leading things off as of right now. In the last lap, they've gained 3/10 over the Ducane prototype. The Lambo was the only car that was able to go underneath the 2-minute time mark on 1:59.7 in the previous lap compared to a 2-minute flat for the Ducane. So just 3/10 in difference between the two of them. But the Ducane now comes over the line with a 1:57.8. We're getting closer to the actual best race lap of this 3 hours, and that was a 1:56 posted by the LMP3, currently in second position, car number 33. So as we were saying before, expect some very fast laps in the next hour and 40 minutes, as the Lamborghini is yet to stop another time, something that instead the prototype Ducane has done around 14 minutes ago. There you can see beautiful sunlight coming through the clouds. The sunset coming pretty shortly here at the Slovakia Ring. We're definitely starting to be in dusk conditions, and this is very challenging for the drivers as they ought to find new reference points for some corners. It is quite usual to see in sprint races drivers finding braking points, for example, with shadows, as well as other reference points that change over time. But of course, in sprint races that isn't a problem. Instead, in a 3-hour race, this could actually prove to be quite a difficult challenge, which is why experienced drivers in endurance racing have evolved into using more stable and reliable braking points as well. Of course, using brake marks as well as the different boards and signs on the circuit, as we now see the Lamborghini GTX going through the second and third corner on the circuit, going up the hill and then down again for one of the biggest braking zones actually for the entire track. You can see the Lambo going quite wide in this very long right-hander before taking the apex once more on the exit of the corner. The gap between the Lambo and the Ducane prototype is now around 28 seconds, though of course they are on two different strategies, which means that we're going to have to wait and see who comes out on top in this peculiar fight between two cars of two different classes. Naturally, the Ducane is expected to be quicker, at least that's what we've gathered from qualifying, but also the balance between the different drivers in the same crew has to be taken into account. We've seen the GTX Lambo being a lot more stable between the two drivers in lap time comparisons, whereas there's a bit of a bigger delta between Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen in the Duquesne number 33, which is of course another factor that needs to come into play, especially for the endurance racing. But meanwhile, the Lamborghini finally pulls into the pit lane.
So maybe something was wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago that we saw the Lambo pull in. The gap itself had gone down by around 8 seconds in the previous lap. We'll see whether this is a quick fix or not. Maybe one of the tires could be a bit loose, maybe an issue with the car itself that has been propelled now up with the jacks, with the hydraulic jacks that have been installed in plenty of GT3 race cars, and that has allowed this car, the number 33 entry, to move back into the lead of this 3-hour race with just 70 minutes to go. And here is the Lamborghini. They're looking at something both in the car and on the rear tires.
One of the options might be, if they are checking on the rear, might be the drive shaft. Because starting with the cold temperature on cold tires and everything was cold, maybe they put too much speed in the start, and getting cold maybe the drive shaft. But they're also checking on the front, so this might not be one of the solutions. Let's see. Sometimes also what could happen is that if you take some gravel, we haven't seen, but maybe the car went a bit wide and take some gravel into the tire. And sometimes for the drivers, feeling the big stones of the gravel on the tire looks like having a puncture, because the tire itself with the energy is moving in not properly how it should. So sometimes for some drivers might be feeling like a puncture, and the fact that they were checking both front and rear, but quite a lot on the rear, so maybe the strange feeling was on the rear left or rear right, and that's the reason why I thought to a drive shaft at the beginning. And then, yeah, the second, checking at the front, looking at the tires, maybe could have been, or even some rubber, because there's quite a lot of used rubber now. So some marble taking from the car because of the draining of the other cars, or itself from the same tire, and this maybe could be one of the reason why they decide to call the car in.
Especially with a lot of laps and a lot of lapped cars in general, it could be quite easy for them to have picked up some rubber, some dead rubber, especially on the outside of certain corners. But now the Lambo is back out on track. We'll see from the lap times in a few minutes time whether or not they're up to speed once more. They have dropped to third position, promoting car number 500 in second spot, and that is the GT3 leader, with Antal Gigo, Max Kranz and David Jan at the wheel of the BMW that has won plenty of races in the GT Cup Series in previous years, one of the most successful entries in recent years. Same can be said in the GTX class for car number 26 with the KTM Crossbow. That is now racing towards the sunset into turn number 3, with Vikram Raz and Jaroslav Honjic at the wheel. Naturally, of course, this is the most crucial moment in their race so far, when concentration might be a bit lower, with just 1 hour left to go. We're far into this race, but still quite far away from the end of it. Meanwhile, some gravel has been picked up throughout the second sector, but that didn't phase the KTM GTX car, the number 26, which we've gone on board with plenty of times. Hearing their engine is always incredibly nice. Also seeing how the drivers are approaching each and every turn. And this is instead the car that has been promoted into second position, the Gamota BMW. And it doesn't look like a nice afternoon, and at least a nice second half of the race for the Lambo, because they're back in after 1 out lap. and therefore it seems to be a bit of a bigger issue than expected. So ETRC Bratislava not enjoying things so far. They were leading with this car, a bit of frustration from the team as well. Their LMP3 entry had to retire earlier on as well. Maybe a software issue could also be the problem, given how they were working on the steering wheel a few seconds ago. Speaking of pit stops, but this is definitely a much more planned one. Car number 500 is in with Antal Gigo, Max Kranz, and now David Jan getting ready to enter the car. We now see the lovely detail near the fuel pump of the amount of seconds that have the amount of liters that are put into the car, as now the hydraulic jacks get to work and the team can change tires for what could actually be the final time. They will have to stop one more time, but it will be unlikely for them to change tires as well. And after a quick driver change, the Gamota BMW is back out on track. As you can see now, the sunset kissing the main grandstand, looking over the pit lane as the cars now head towards what definitely is the most aesthetically pleasing time of the day. Not so much for who's driving, however, given that the sun glare is always kind of difficult to deal with, especially in these kind of cars. But it is something that the drivers are getting used to after years and years of racing. Of course, with the time changing, the visibility conditions change with it, meaning that, for example, a couple of corners that weren't an issue before could become one pretty soon. And naturally, this could change things. Meanwhile, there's a car in the gravel, and that is our leading car, the number 33 Duquesne, which was running smoothly so far, but maybe a mistake, and it looks to have beached itself into the gravel. You can see the rear tires spinning in a desperate moment as desperation kicks in the pits. That was definitely not what they wanted, and maybe that visibility changes playing a big factor, or maybe it was just driver error or a problem on the car. We'll see if we can get a replay of their off, but unfortunately bad luck keeps to its history in this race with prototype class. Definitely not what the team had in mind with the number 33 looking to be out of contention. The yellow flag has been brought out. This could also be a moment to see the safety car as well, given that the car is beached near the gravel, and in fact the safety car has been called out on track.
I told you it was impossible to call a safety car.
And see what happens then. With the security vehicle now waiting for the leader. Of course, having to wait not for car number 33, but for car number 500 of Antal Gigo, Max Kranz and David Jan, which will be the new de facto leader after this. The BMW M4 GT3 Evo getting its chance to shine. Yeah, this looks to be over for the LMP3 prototype. The driver itself has stopped trying to desperately put the foot on the pedal, on the gas pedal, trying to get out of the gravel trap. Car definitely is beached by now, and therefore this will not be an easy fix for them. One car that is, on the other hand, staying out of trouble is this one, the number 25 126 KTM crossbow. You can now see some of the beauty shots from the sunset, which unfortunately car number 33 will not be enjoying as of right now. On the other hand, the crossbow will be moving into second position as the Porsche of Bob Bau and Rafael Reiter will eventually move into third place, with the GTC1 class leaders having fixed some of the issues that they had previously, and they are now out on track once more.
Now it will be very interesting, the restart, because we got all the delays and the gaps basically back to zero. But on the other hand, it's such a shame for those who had a strategy who give them the chance to have some margin on the rivals, and seeing everything basically starting. Yeah, now we are 1:59 minutes now, so yeah, I guess in maybe 2 laps maximum we will have a restart, and is back to a sprint race, because in less than 1 hour we're gonna have the final result.
Yeah, basically the sprint format of the GT Cup Series that has brought this championship here at the Slovakia Ring for its annual endurance race. This is actually a perfect chance for us to take a look at the calendar for this season. A 7-stop year that saw the drivers begin their path in Austria at the Red Bull Ring earlier in April, racing then in Grobnik for round number 2, and here at the Slovakia Ring for the annual endurance race for round number 3. We will be back to our usual sprint format in Most in August in the Czech Republic, before coming back here in September at the Slovakia Ring for the second outing of GT Cup Series on this circuit, this time of course for the sprint format. We will then be flying back to the Czech Republic in Brno this time around, and last but definitely not least, the final event of the GT Cup Series, bringing the championship to the Hungaroring in Budapest, which will also be the final round of other Central European championships such as F4 CEZ, which is one of the other series that is present this weekend here at the Slovakia Ring.
Well, I have to say CEZ Championship has basically all my favorite tracks in Europe as well, because it's next to one of my favorite town next to the tracks. But let me say, it's quite nice to race this kind of championship during those weekends. And yeah, safety car, it's quite a good call for those who still had to set the pit stop, while on the other hand it was a shame for those who did the driver change or the pit stop just before the safety car came in. But on the other hand, we have the unique chance to see car going on a low speed with the amazing sun of the sunset.
safety car is still out on track, so everything is calm. But now
It
that
was.
will be over because it has opted to come in at the end of this lap, and therefore we are back on the green flag conditions with the KTM Crossbow leading things off, though the real leading car is the BMW right behind, car number 500, who is around 3 laps in front of the rest of the field. Of course, given the different classes, it is natural to see these kind of gaps, but we will be watching on in the next 56 minutes of racing as now the BMW moves into first, not just on the standings but also on the racetrack itself, having some clean air for the next few minutes. And now we could actually start having some very quick lap times, especially in this final hour of racing as the sun goes down and the track temperature gets cooler and cooler. We were in the around 34 to 35 degrees earlier this morning, and in the peak hours towards 2 or 3 p.m. now it's back down to 27 degrees, the track temperature. Meanwhile, the Mercedes AMG GT4 gets out on track once more as their potentially final pit stop has just come to a close, or perhaps the final full service stop before a little splash and dash in 30 to 40 minutes time. The same can be said for the leading BMW as well, that is currently hitting the track in anger once more. The fastest overall time for the GT3 class is a 1 minute 58.5 set by the number 500 car. Here we go once more on board with the KTM. Meanwhile, the 33 Ducan has managed to get back to the pits after being rescued by the marshals. They've lost a lot of time, of course. They were in the lead and now trail by 3 laps, but they definitely want to finish this race still, which is why they're back into the pit lane.
Yeah, they're still fighting for the overall podium.
Yeah, currently in 3rd position. And not really challenged for that place should they be able to go back to their usual pace. They could try and catch to the back of the KTM Crossbow, though they trail by over a lap, and therefore that will be quite tough as an ask for the car that is now trying to see whether all its systems work. Of course, coming back to green flag racing and pushing in anger. As we now see the prototype into turn number 3 before tackling the 2nd sector where everything went wrong a few minutes ago. Of course, as drivers, they need to be quite quick to forget about the difficulties and the mistakes, just reset and come back out on track.
Like the story of my life.
Of our lives.
I don't know
possibly.
about yours, but mine, everything went wrong. And not only 3 laps ago.
5, potentially. Meanwhile, the BMW is still in front, the KTM is still in 2nd, and we're still on board with 7 car.
We were about 250k per hour.
Those are the kind of speeds that that car is capable of handling. It's actually quite a bit more on the start-finish straight. Usually get up towards 260 or 270 as well. Of course, depending on the kind of setup that the car has. A bit more power in the BMW M4 on the other hand, as they are starting lap number 61. Now with 51 minutes remaining. Car number 500 currently being the only one together with the LMP3 prototype under the 2-minute mark. And 1:59.8 the previous lap for Antargigo. One of the most known faces in the Central European paddocks, especially in GT3 racing, having driven this specific car for quite some years now. As we now see the Ducati prototype finally able to go back to green flag racing, they seem to have picked up the pace as well. So I suspect the previous off was just a small driver error, with the car's systems seeming to function pretty well after the marshals helped them back on the racetrack when the safety car was out, which means that of course they lost quite some time, as they are 4 laps behind where they were before, but of course they're still in the fight for the overall podium, and then they will have to try to go up until the end. There's less than 50 minutes now on the clock. 49 minutes and 45 seconds precisely in this moment, as the BMW once again tackles the first sector for the 62nd time today. A car that of course is no stranger to race victories here in the GT Cup Series. Meanwhile, the KTM is into the pits.
It's pretty weird to get in now, as they got the safety car option before.
Yep, we'll see whether or not this is a planned stop or not. We're expecting them to switch drivers by 1 point, but it does look like a planned stop.
No,
so
it was just tying the seat belt, refueling.
yeah, we'll see whether or not they can make it until the very end from now. Bit of a tough ask, having a little under 50 minutes. They completed their first stint in around 38 minutes, so we are expecting them to make a splash towards the 10-minute mark, but of course they could also go with the option of saving some fuel, given that they're not really fighting against anyone at this specific moment in time, only trying to reach the end of this race. The driver telling the team to move out of the way so he can get ready to start things off once more.
Politely.
He didn't look that polite in my opinion, but that's just my humble opinion. So he was definitely eager to go back racing in these amazing conditions as well. And here we go back on the racetrack. It is always great to see and hear the car almost come back to life after disengaging the pit limiter. That's exactly what happened right there on board with the KTM Crossbow, currently in second position, still in front of the Ducati prototype despite the additional stop. We expect both of them to pit one more time. As we now move towards the last 45 minutes of racing. And here you can see two different classes once more, one against the other, GT3 and GT4 racing, which has become the staple of sports car racing across, well, not just Europe, but the entire world for sure, with GT3s being widely used in a plethora of different championships, from the highest level of racing towards even gentleman driving, and the GT4 being almost a feeder series to the GT3 program, with drivers getting started on their sports car journeys. Plenty of successful racing series in Europe, such as the GT4 European Series, that have taken these cars to the limit. Not just in sprint races, but of course in endurance racing, and that is something that we have this weekend as well. Not just with the GT Cup Series, but also with the GTC Endurance Challenge that we saw earlier today. Also boasting GT4 cars on their starting grid. One of them being this one that we've just seen seconds ago, the Mercedes AMG GT4, one of the best cars for this program. Of course, a category that has been populated for many years by the biggest manufacturers such as Porsches, Aston Martin, Audi, and so on. Meanwhile, car number 26 still working hard at Sunset to bring it home. The gap now after the pit stop is around 11 seconds compared to the LMP3 prototype, though of course the latter is lapping much faster than the KTM, around 6 seconds a lap faster. Of course, the two cars are widely different in philosophy and in its creation. Meanwhile, it's very nice to see the Porsche back on track as well, the leader of the GTC1 standings. That is car number 846 of Bob Baugh and Rafael Reiter. So far in 4th position in the overall standings, but crucially for them in the lead of their GTC1 category, the one reserved to the Porsche Cup cars. Now tackling turn number 3, which we've seen has become a bit of a crucial section of the circuit, to say the least, with the ARC Bratislava Ligier spinning out on lap number 1 in that same corner. Back on board with the KTM. We almost saw 2 full sectors on board with the KTM Crossbow, and that was very nice to see. Also the lapping procedures and the fight as well. That was the Duquesne LMP3 car moving up into 2nd position. What didn't look like an overtake actually was, due to the fact that the two are part of different classes and therefore speeds are radically different between the two models. But everything is still to play for here in Slovakia, as of course the final few pit stops will come in pretty shortly. In the fight for a second, the LMP3 is definitely the favorite now that they have moved back into 2nd, but the two cars are yet to pit, and the KTM Crossbow will likely have a sensibly shorter pit stop, given the fact that they pitted around 30 minutes later than the LMP3, which is quite known to have a big fuel tank on the other hand. Therefore, things could even out quite nicely towards the end, but we'll see in due course. Here's the Mercedes-AMG GT4 with its 3 drivers, with Schmeichel, a former TCR Eastern Europe driver, Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek in the car with him. And there's the beautiful sound of the Duquesne D08 coming through turn number 2 and into the braking zone of turn number 3. Now coming up towards the other Mercedes and lapping them pretty easily. As we now see, the second sector has become pretty much dark all the way throughout, with no sunlight directly hitting the track or the visor of any car, which has made it probably easier for the drivers to spot their braking points. On the other hand, the same cannot be said for sector 1. Lovely colors on the skies here in Slovakia for what are the final 40 minutes of racing. The BMW M4 still in the lead, and KTM in third. Meanwhile, the Porsche is back in for what seems to be another oil-related change. We saw this exact thing happen before, and the duct tape being applied to the front splitter. This time the latter is still in place, but work is still being conducted on the front engine bay. The Porsche, of course, will want to finish this race on track, but this is roughly the same amount of running time that this car had in the first half of this endurance race. It went around 70 minutes before having to pit to change oil, and after 70 more minutes the car is in once more. They were in 4th place in the overall standings. They still have a 4-lap advantage over 5th position, but should they lose that, they would still finish in 5th place quite comfortably, as 6th position downwards are cars that have stopped during this race and haven't resumed the on-track action. You can see now on the bottom right corner work being made on the Porsche, which is likely getting ready to get on track once more in a bit. This has become quite routine for them and for the team. Meanwhile, on the other picture, we see the BMW still leading things off, and of course having the time of their lives at the moment, with a 4-lap advantage over the Duquesne in 2nd position. Good job from the Mercedes as well, as they are leading the GT4 standings. And now the Porsche is back towards the fast lane as they move closer to the end of the pit lane to rejoin the track. They will disengage the limiter in just a second. Here they go. And now back on the racing line towards turn number 1 for the final 36 minutes of racing. The sole Porsche Cup car remaining after the number 2 entry of Thomas Lack and Katarzyna Balawajder was forced to retire after 28 laps. It was a great fight between the two of them, actually. Eden on track with a daring overtake in the first 20 minutes, but unfortunately that was cut short after the other Porsche's retirement. Meanwhile, here we go with the Duquesne that is currently in second position. They have been lapping quite quick, and they have been the quickest entry in recent laps, getting 9/10 in the previous one over the leading BMW, but of course the gap now being 4.5 laps. It is very tough to see them back into contention for the win, if not for an issue for the BMW. Now starting another lap, precisely number 64, with a 2-minute flat once more for car number 33, still the fastest car on track and still holding the fastest lap as well, which was set in the first hour of racing. That was a 1 minute 56.364.
And it's crazy how you arrive on turn 2 basically blind, because you have the uphill, so you go flat out and you need to arrive at the braking point, which basically didn't know what's happening. And so it's very challenging and demanding track on this side. And we saw before, arriving at the braking point, the disc, with the high temperature and the night, it's, let me say, very Le Mans style to see enlightened from the inside of the rims, and it's quite romantic, let me say, at this stage of the day. Night almost.
We can see right now, yes, we could see it on the front left of the Duquesne. Glowing brake discs have become part of the sport that we all love, as the Duquesne now moves towards the final couple of corners, and we are safely through the sunset period and now into the early stages of the night. Of course, this being the final on-track action for the day, but not for the weekend, as tomorrow on Sunday we will have plenty of on-track action here at the Slovakia Ring. We've had plenty of fun today. I'm sure we'll have plenty more tomorrow.
I cannot wait to hear your commentary for Formula 4.
You're always way too kind. Unfortunately, we won't have another GT Cup Series race to commentate on, but of course, the championship will be back soon for round number 4.
Hopefully next year.
Hopefully next year. I mean, the endurance format was introduced in recent years, and it's always been a blast. As we were saying before, the Slovakia Ring is one of the perfect tracks for endurance racing. We've seen it in the past, we're seeing it now, and we're very likely to see it in the future as well. Multi-class racing being, of course, at the heart of endurance racing, especially in recent seasons. Now Anton Gigo, having completed 69 laps in this race, already through to lap number 70. It was short-lived, but very much enjoyed.
Bro, just 2 laps ago it was 6-7 laps.
And now thankfully we're into the 70s. As we move closer and closer, unfortunately, to the end. With 32 minutes or so left on the clock. It is almost 9 p.m. here at the Slovakia Ring. I mean, we've gone through the different stages of the evening rituals. We've had happy hour, we've had dinner, and now we're getting ready for drinks again, probably. after,
I'm always up for drinking.
because we're not driving, of course.
Of course, definitely.
We definitely know that some of the drivers will celebrate this win once the clock strikes 0 and the checker flag will be waved. And someone who is definitely eager to do that in their class is Vitschmenko with the GT4 Mercedes, being in the lead of set standings, with Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek alongside him in this little adventure that was this 3-hour race that is now entering in its final 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Di Gamota BMW still going strong. The BMW M4 GT3 Evo proving to be one of the most reliable cars out there so far. Not just that, of course, having a good and reliable driver lineup as well. We talked about Antal Gigo throughout this race, but Max Kranz and David Jan have done an amazing job throughout this race so far. They are consistently the fastest GT car, and have done so in the previous lap as well with a 2-minute 01.9. The KTM Crossbow in the meantime still holding third with a 2:11.7 being their most recent lap time. They're looking to secure third place as well as the GTX class win, which definitely wasn't on the cards at the start of this one, given how quick the Lamborghini GTX was. But then, of course, issues hitting the ARC Bratislava entry meant that the KTM was capable of rising to the occasion and taking the lead in the GTX standings.
Less than half an hour to the end of the race.
Time flies when we have fun, right?
I totally agree with you.
With the sun now basically set behind the hills, the Slovakian hills that surround the racetrack. And now, of course, is the most crucial time because the end is approaching, and of course concentration lapses can come at any second, which is what happened possibly for the Ducati team a little over half an hour ago. And as the cars run towards the finish line, they are getting ready for these final 28 minutes, and of course the final round of pit stops, which we will be seeing shortly. All the cars are on different strategies, of course. This is the beauty of endurance racing and of different classes in the same race. 5 different categories present in this event. I mean, last year we've had even more, with one of the Clio Cups being present as well this weekend. The Clio Cup isn't racing here at the Slovakia Ring. It will do so later on this year. Therefore, this wasn't on the cards, but it was incredibly nice to see them last season on the same racetrack as an MP3 prototypes, which is something very unique that is quite hard to find in any other championship.
So let me ask you something. Who sang "The sun goes down, the stars come out, and all that counts is here and now. My universe will never be the same"?
I have to say that I'm really glad that you came. But I mean, the stars have gone down. They've gone up, actually. The sun has gone down.
Not yet.
I hope they never do.
Let's wait 26 minutes.
That will for sure be the case. As we have our very first final pit stop of the day, and that is the Mercedes-AMG GT4 stopping for the final time, and that is Express Auto Racing doing the final few checks before their Mercedes flies into the night once more and reaches the end of this race in just over 25 minutes, potentially still in the lead of the GT4 standings. That is very likely the case, as well as finishing in the top 5 of the overall race classifications. Meanwhile, the other 4 cars left on track are yet to pit. Someone who potentially could go until the end is the 846 Porsche, which we've seen on track for 40 minutes since their final stop. We also saw someone else dive into the pit lane. Meanwhile, here is the leading BMW, the number 500 from Gamoto Racing. Still on top, still in P1, still with 4 laps on the Ducan in second position. Comfortably in the lead then for these final 25 minutes of racing. Meanwhile, here goes the Mercedes out of the pit stop and out of the pits for the final time. Just behind them, the leading BMW coming through into turn number 1. And meanwhile, we may be seeing the Ligier prototype out on track once more for the final few minutes, as ETRC Bratislava has worked relentlessly on the yellow prototype of Miro and Maciej Konopka. And speaking of pit lane, the KTM Crossbow is in for its final stop. We may be seeing a driver change. Yes, we are. The wheel has been disconnected. The seat belts have come off. And in just a few seconds, the driver will be out of the car as well. Ooh, there's also a couple of flames coming from the back end of the car, but thankfully everything seems to be under control. Bit of a fiery pit stop to round things off for Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Hončík. Another driver change coming as one of them jumps out, the other one gets strapped back in. That's just how it goes in endurance racing. The team also wiping the windshield, clear of any dust particles. As the Crossbow gets ready to fight for the final spot on the podium, they will have to defend from Bob Bowen, Rafael Reiter, though with a healthy 6-lap gap. The only thing standing between themselves and an overall podium is the reliability of their car and the mistakes of their drivers. So the KTM rejoins the track once more. And we're actually quite curious now to see whether or not the Ligier will be back on track as well, after ARC Bratislava worked on the car quite relentlessly over the last couple of hours. Just to finish the race would be very good for Mira Machokonopka. They're currently in 8th position and stopped since lap 31. And for reference, as you can see, we're into lap 75 now. And here you can see in the pits of Gamoto Racing looking over their BMW. Wave high back to them, of course, from the commentary box, as the team is watching their BMW race towards the finish line in 1st position. Now through turn 13, one of the longest corners radius-wise in this circuit. Now it is really dark out there, but this lovely shot as well lets us see all the colors in the sky at the pit wall.
Oh, you show us all the colors of the rainbow.
As you could also see and hear, actually, one of the cars in the pit lane, and that was likely the LMP3 prototype of Ligier and ARC Bratislava roaring back towards the fast lane. And we're now seeing 2 headlights, which will turn into an LMP3 prototype in just a second, I think. And that is the case with car number 44 back out on track for the final 20 minutes of racing. That is tremendous effort being repaid by ARC Bratislava, as the team will be very happy that the car is back on track. Of course, now the first few laps will be all about seeing whether or not all the systems are in check and if everything is working properly to safely bring Mira Machokonopka over the finish line, out on track instead of into the pits. Of course, these are vastly different conditions compared to what these two last had on a racetrack around 100 minutes ago. And it goes without saying that this is quite tough for them as well, knowing that you're not racing for anything in particular, given that they are down in 7th position and 22 laps down on 6th place. But of course, it's always nice to finish a race out on track instead of looking at the finish from the pit lane, especially in endurance racing. That's the culture that goes around. So we're back to having 7 cars out on track. As now the LMP3 prototype from ARC Bratislava starts its first flying lap in a little under 2 hours. Car number 44 taking turn 1 in anger for the very first time. We're back to having both prototypes out on the circuit. The other one, the Duquesne, is currently in 2nd position and nearing what could be a final pit stop for the car that has been leading this race from the start pretty much up until the 2-hour mark. And then a slight mistake into turn 3 has seen them beach the car into the gravel, drop a few places. Meanwhile, unfortunately, it's race over for car number 2, with the Porsche unfortunately having to wave goodbye as people are starting to do in the pit box as well to this race prematurely, managing to complete 28 laps before having to retire. Someone who's still going on the other hand, is the Mercedes-AMG GT4. Orbit Schmeichel, Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek. Currently in 5th position overall, but most crucially in the lead of the GT4 standings. The Mercedes now navigating through turns 3 and 4. GT4 cars are of course no stranger to the endurance world, being part of many endurance series across the world, not just in Europe of course. Is the entry-level point for all those who want to start and kickstart their GT careers as drivers, being quite easy to drive and to learn, but rather hard to bring to the limit. That is where of course good drivers are separated from the elite ones, as they can make the difference in any condition or car. Meanwhile, we are back with the crossbow up the hill towards turn number 2, and then we'll do the same towards turn number 3. Let's ride on board with it. The 846 Porsche is still in 4th position, as we can see from the graphics. 12 laps down on the leader, but still strongly in the lead of the GTC1 class, the one reserved to Cup cars specifically. We had 2 Porsche 911 Cup cars in this race. One of them unfortunately is already back in the truck, as we saw before. The other one is still racing with just a little over 13 minutes to go. And as the 846 Porsche of Bob Baum and Raphael Reiter is still holding on to 4th place in the standings, they are getting ready to celebrate the end of this race and get some food as well for themselves.
Are you inviting me?
I mean, if you want to come,
Okay.
I'll be more than happy to welcome you. What should we have for dinner?
I have no clue. Something special here around, I guess. Some
A place that's
local
open.
Slovak.
For the most part.
True point.
I mean, there's always an option somewhere out there, probably. As teams and drivers are getting ready for these final 12 minutes of racing. And the fans as well. I'm sure there's still a couple of them in the standings. Meanwhile, the number 33 Ducan is still trying their hardest, potentially even to finish this race without having to stop again, and that would be very good on their behalf. We've been talking about fuel saving throughout this race, and that is of course one of the main points of this format. Fewer pit stops of course mean a faster race overall time and a better chance at a podium finish. which is what the leading BMW has done throughout this race, and now with an almost 5-lap lead over car number 33, they are almost certain of taking victory. They just need a couple more minutes out there in first, but of course we will celebrate them and every single finisher at the checkered flag in just under 11 minutes. Night racing, of course, being a concept that is deeply tied to endurance racing as well. Some of the best moments in the history of this type of racing culture have come at night, and usually, of course, the darkness being a huge obstacle in the way of finishing what usually are much longer endurance racing races compared to these 3 hours of fun that we've had so far. But of course, it's still very tricky to kind of understand where the breaking points are, especially at night when these drivers didn't have that much track time and much experience with these cars and this car and track combo this weekend. Not having a practice session at night usually makes it quite interesting for this race, as we can clearly see who is adapting well to the darker conditions and who is maybe a bit more conservative towards the end. Then of course the race situation plays a huge role into this. Now with no real battles out on track, it is quite natural to see drivers not pushing at the fullest potential, just trying to bring it home, as we say in motor racing, which is definitely what our teams are trying to do. We are currently into lap number 82 of this race, with 81 laps completed. Antalgigo, Max Kranz and David Jan getting ready to celebrate what looks to be a certain victory. But of course we will be having to wait for the checkered flag to declare our winners. This is of course very promising for the 500 crew for this season. Let's not forget that this is just the third round of the 7 scheduled races of this year, though of course this is the sole endurance format event that we have for the 2026 GT Cup Series campaign. We will be taking a slight break after this race weekend. We'll be back in Most at the start of August for race weekend number 4, the real halfway point of this season. Then it's back to the Slovakia Ring in September for round number 5, before once again going to the Czech Republic in Brno this time around, another hugely popular circuit in the world of motorsport in Eastern Europe. And then last but not least, visiting Budapest and the Hungaroring for round number 7, the final stop on the GT Cup Series calendar. That has also been to the Red Bull Ring earlier this year in April, and to Grobnik for race weekend number 2 of 2026. Just a little over 6 minutes left in this race. The KTM Crossbow navigating the penultimate corner on this 5.9 kilometer circuit. And now gets ready to start what could be the third to last lap for them at least. Currently in third position, Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Hončík. Ahead of them, of course, the Ducati prototype of Thomas Ambiel and Mads Kjelde Larsen. It was rather unfortunate for them to drop out of contention for the win after beaching their car into the gravel with just 1 hour left, which is what brought out the safety car, the sole safety car that we've had this year out on track. It was a shame for them to drop from first all the way down to fourth, but then they did very well to recover up to second in the overall standings for what was looking to be a rather easy win. But of course, nothing comes easy in the world of motorsports, and that is what they learned the hard way today. This will for sure make them stronger, though, for the next few races, where all the pressure will be on the car number 500, giving their exceptionally good performance this weekend. Antalgigo, Max Krantz and Novidian with a little under 5 minutes now left on the clock. They will be our winners now, given their 4-lap advantage over their rivals. Just having to wait until the very end of the race. And the same can be said for the GTC1 class, where the 846 Porsche is safely in the lead. And then, of course, we should not forget about the Mercedes AMG GT4, currently in 5th position. The Ligier prototype of ARC Bratislava is still out on track. After their early issues, they had to box after the first hour and stayed there with the team, relentlessly working on the car up until around 20 minutes ago, when we saw them bringing the Ligier prototype back out on the fast lane of the pits and then back onto the racetrack. It's very nice to see how vastly different the conditions are compared to what we had roughly 3 hours ago, when we were on the starting grid with our cars and getting ready for the show to begin. As we now enter what should be the penultimate lap of the race. The last 12 kilometers or so of on-track action, not just for this race, but for the day as well. But I'm sure tomorrow we'll have plenty of fun across the entire day, with a plethora of different championships. Of course, the FIA European Truck Racing Championship being the marquee event of this weekend, but then we also have Formula 4 Central European Zone, TCR European Endurance, and the GTC Endurance Challenge being fantastic championships to watch as the racing unfolds here in Slovakia. The BMW now approaching turn number 10, the slowest part of the circuit. Of course, the second sector being very technical and difficult to approach for some of the cars. We're getting to turn 10 right about now after this uphill section. Elevation changes being quite important around here, being one of the peculiar aspects of this championship as well. And as the racing unfolds here for what looks to be the final lap of this race, as Antalgigo together with Max Krantz and David Jan get ready to celebrate in around 2 minutes time, as we are now into the final lap of this race. The BMW has worked fantastically well in these 3 hours and has looked like a perfect piece of machinery, which is why it has deserved this race win more than anyone else. They were the most consistent entry and the fastest one right at the end. Still lapping quite quickly, though of course they have eased off the throttle and they're not going for fastest laps just in case anything happens. They want to reach the finish line and put an end to this race with an exclamation mark on top of it. Now into the second sector for the BMW. The Gamota Racing team doing a fantastic job, and right now the clock strikes 0. And the BMW is looking to take this race win just in front of the Duqueine prototype. Naturally, the car number 33 will be disappointed not to come away with a win after what happened roughly an hour ago, with Ambiel and Larsen disappointed in their second place finish, but they are the winners and will be the winners of the D5 class. As now we see the BMW rounding out the final couple of corners for this race. It has been a very entertaining event here in the GT Cup Series, but as the checkered flag flies, it will be the BMW M4 GT3 Evo of Gamota Racing, car number 500, with Antal Gigo, Max Kranz and David Jan, who take the checkered flag first to take the win. Second place will belong to the Duqueine entry, the car number 33 of Thomas Ambiel, Mads Kjelde Larsen being at the wheel of what was the leading car in the opening 2 hours, but then they had to settle for second. Of course, they will take the win in the D5 class. Third place will belong to the Crossbow, the KTM, who has set the standard in the GTX class today with car number 26, Viktor Mraz and Jaroslav Honchik, just in front of the winning crew in the GTC1 standings, the Porsche Cup Cars class, being dominated by Bob Bao and Rafael Reiter. And then last but definitely not least, this car right here, the Mercedes AMG GT4, taking the spoils in the GT4 class, with Vít Schmeichel at the wheel of the Express Auto Racing entry, together with Patrick Kirov and Roman Novacek. A huge congratulations to ARC Bratislava as well for having finished this race on track with its Ligier after the issues that have hit the entry number 44 after the first hour, with Mira Macho Konopka taking the checkered flag in 7th position overall and 2nd place in the D5 standings. With the last few fans getting ready to leave, it's our time to say goodbye as well, with the final race result of the FIA GT Cup Series Endurance race here on screen for you. It's been a blast to commentate this spectacle with you. I want to thank Antonio as well for being with me.
My pleasure.
And it is everything from us here at the Slovakia Ring. Thank you for being with us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and see you guys tomorrow.